Hello and welcome to another episode of the DigiTeacher. In this week's episode, I'd like to air a panel discussion which I had on Teams on the 28th of June, which involved Cheryl Williams, who's a primary school teacher in Johannesburg, and Gabi Immelman and David Morgan, who work for MindJoy, which has been doing some really interesting work in using AI chatbots in education. And we discussed the whole issue of large language models, the present, what's going on at the moment, and the future. I think a lot of really interesting issues were raised in this discussion. Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to our panel discussion on large language models in education. And we've got three panelists here today: Cheryl Williams, Dave Morgan, and Gabi Immelman. Dave and Gabi are from MindJoy, and Cheryl, I've forgotten what school you're from.
I'm from Glenwood House.
Okay, great. So let's just jump straight in, and I'm going to ask if we just go around the table, and starting maybe with Gabi and your experience, where you think we're at the moment with large language models in education.
Sure. So I'm Gabi. I am the founder of MindJoy. And we have been playing in the large language model education space for probably 2 years now. I think we were part of GPT-3, the beta from OpenAI. That was before ChatGPT was launched. And so we actually had a very large body of research. We hosted hackathons across the world, predominantly in South Africa, which was very, very exciting, at a bunch of schools across the country, hosting a session and projects where students could build basically their own version of ChatGPT. The hackathon's premise was, if you had an AI, what would you get it to do for you? And you can imagine across 5,000 students, almost all of them unanimously said my homework. And fast forward, that wasn't just the premise of the hackathon. Then once they've solved homework forever, the question was, well, what do you do with all your time? And that's where the students got really, really creative. And so it was predominantly a coding project and hackathon, the format of a hackathon. But what that big scale project gave us insight into was how this technology was going to change teaching and learning, how students thought about the work they did, philosophical questions, ethical questions, but it also gave us a lot of insight into how that changes the actual process of learning. So what we started seeing was a lot more learning by trial and error, a huge desire for creativity and taking ownership. And so anyone in the education space, and I know Dave will say a lot about this too, we've been trying to design for student-led learning for a very long time. That's not a new concept in education. And I think maybe AI has just put a lot more pressure on us now as educators and school systems and policymakers to take this more seriously, because the fact that this technology is everywhere means that we are forced to rethink how we do assessments, how we design coursework, how we design learning. But I think we're still at the very beginning. I think we're only just starting to scratch the surface of how this technology is going to transform the way we live, learn, work, and play.
Yeah, I mean, just to throw a little bit out there, wasn't 21st century skills supposed to transform education? Weren't computers supposed to transform education? That's a cry that you hear perennially, and yet education has this remarkable resistance to all kinds of change. Cheryl, your thoughts on where we're at and at the moment?
Yeah, I think we in a tech-driven world, and it's becoming more and more so. And I think it's not going to go away. And as much as some people wish it would, I think as educators we can't not embrace it and move with it and learn from it and use it to empower our students. At the end of the day, we're in this to to empower students and to use it as a tool to help us to do that better. That's my passion. And so, yeah, yeah, to infinity and beyond.
To boldly go. Dave, your thoughts? Dave seems to be frozen at the moment. So maybe Cheryl, what have you used large language models in your classes at all?
Yeah, so I teach, I'm predominantly in the prep school or completely in the prep school, but it's working from that foundation level, teaching, the use of AI. It hasn't just arrived now. It's kind of been there all along when you're looking at teaching children how to use predictive text, in a digital sense, is in itself AI. So teaching the ethical use of using digital has been the space I've been in. And yeah, so from little, so I'm working from a foundation level of integrating and using everything that's at our fingertips effectively. So yeah, that's my experience. Yeah, as a professional, AI has become my personalized administrative assistant, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and I know, Gabi, that you are doing really, really exciting work with chatbots. Do you want to tell us about some of that work? I attended one of your presentations.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I think we currently have a platform, so and we work with schools all over the world, which is super cool. And those are mostly hey, Dave's back. um, those are mostly, interestingly, to your point of 21st century skills are supposed to change education, all of that. Interestingly, most of the schools that Mindjoy works with are schools that embrace 21st century skills, and that's actually one of their priorities. So those are typically the schools that work well with us. We take a professional development first approach. So we have what we call AI teacher labs, and anyone can join those. And that's really an experimental place for teachers to come explore AI tutors and how you can actually create not just tutors, but simulations or experiences using this technology for safe use in the classroom. So we actually, build the layer between teachers and students with advanced moderation systems. We create a lot of teacher and learning specific insights that can leverage, targeted interventions and personalized learning. And then that's just really the start of it for us. Like we're looking and we're really excited about getting into and scratching much, much deeper in terms of, how do we actually create tools that teachers can use and that are easy for them to really create, these experiences that they've always wanted to create, and it be easy to do, safe, fun, and really student-centric and focused. And if we can create a holistic view of the students' learning journey, we can better support them. It really changes the way you facilitate a classroom. So one of the things we often see is like this flipped classroom, or one of our teachers said, "Oh my goodness, this is a flipped classroom on steroids," because all of a sudden the students are learning independently and the teacher is actually able to move around the classroom and support students where they need it. They can do think, pair, share, pair up, and use the tutor system as a way to critically evaluate, is it accurate, is it good, what did I learn, what didn't I learn, where are the gaps. So seeing really interesting opportunities for innovative applications in the classroom. And for us, that's not actually about the technology. That's about great teachers being able to use the technology well.
Yeah.
Dave, your thoughts. Where are we at the moment with LLMs?
Yeah, well, I think surprisingly, shockingly far into the future is my answer. But I think schools are just not adopting them at the moment. And I think, I was in the classroom as recently as February, and I was using AI in my lessons. I was using Mindjoy in my lessons. And the main thing it did for me is, 20 years in the classroom, 20 years of practice. I had.
Oh, we've lost Dave again.
Teams is acting up for the MacBook user.
Oh dear. That's for using a Mac. Eh?
Yeah, we're getting punished there, so the AI is taking over. I think what Dave would probably share a story around just like all the different ways you can actually leave the technology. One of Dave's favorite stories to share is he had an asylum seeker in his class. This was in the UK, and wasn't really proficient in English, for example, and it was a new student, and it was sort of something that happened on the fly. In that, it was a new, as you know, in the classroom, as a teacher, unexpected things happen despite your best efforts to plan a great lesson, and to take all the variables into, consideration. But one of the things Dave was actually able to do in his class was to spin up a Arabic English tutor for his class, and the student was able to follow along. And it was obviously really stressful for that student already, considering all the just like the context of that student. But there was like a big smile on the face to be able to actually like know what was going on in the lesson. And Dave could also see the real-time translation happening. And that was just like a mind-blowing experience for Dave, because there was a way to connect with the student who wasn't previously able to connect with, and still get on with, the time pressure of getting through the curriculum. So I think that was the story Dave tells.
Well, that is a fantastic application. I mean, I've seen that with some of our Chinese students, that they have an app on their phone that they're using to translate, and fantastic application.
Yeah. It's a really, just that in of itself is also really interesting in the context of South Africa, right? Just natural language. Dave, you're back. I told your asylum seeker story. I probably didn't do it as much justice as you usually do, but
I'm sorry.
I thought that's maybe what you would have shared, like just the amazing experience of being able to connect with that student.
Oh yeah, it's the differentiation that's like shocking to me. It's I do my lessons, I do my starter, I get a good relationship, but the moment you say go, there's 5 or 6 hands up for clarification, there's questions straight away. And you can't be proactive in a situation like that. It's only reactive teaching. And like more than that, it's I can differentiate to different abilities. I can differentiate to different types of interests. But if somebody comes into my class that speaks a completely different language from me, I can't do anything for that. So what I found really useful there in the classroom was sort of 10x in my potential. Like there were no questions immediately because they had something else knowledgeable to ask. Students that came into my classroom that couldn't speak the language or weren't strong in the language had a bit of support. And I keep saying 10x, but like honestly, I felt like there were 10 of me in the classroom because there was so much support and so much help. But as a rule, I think schools are afraid of the technology. And I've talked to lots of schools where the first question is, we ban ChatGPT. What do we do? How do we get AI back in the classroom? And I wrote a blog post a while ago that ChatGPT is this very blunt tool. It's a blunt tool for answering questions. I think you've got to look at things that are designed for the classroom to get it working in the classroom, because these things are not going to go away. In 10 years' time, these things are going to be like spell check is to us. And we need to teach people how to use them.
Yeah. So, I mean, are you suggesting there that if it were trained totally on curated data, for example, that some of the problems associated with hallucination might go away?
I don't think so. I think I don't know if you've ever played with like the playgrounds feature of like OpenAI, where you get to fiddle a bit more with the settings. But one of the key features is like how much creativity it brings into it. And the more you lower that, so it's just using the information it's got, the less inference, the less sort of decision making and analysis it does. So there's something about the spark of creativity and randomness. I think those hallucinations, we can do a lot to mitigate them, but I don't think, in these iterations of this technology, they're ever going to completely go away. We just need to do our very best job to train people how to use them, to look for them, and to mitigate them where they appear.
So, I mean, let's look at hallucinations. To my mind, it seems to be a bit of a problem that if you are 6 years old, how are you going to have the skills to be able to do that? If you're 16, it might be a different matter. So it is age a factor here. Should we be banning ChatGPT up until a certain age, or how do we kind of introduce it when kids are able to handle it? And anyone wanting to jump in? Cheryl, what about young kids? What's your gut feel there?
Yeah, look, I think it's I mean, I think the skills of critical thinking and ethical thinking, and those are all things that we need to be doing along with the digital literacy. So exposing a young child to ChatGPT, I mean, using Google search is everything's integrated anyway. So for me to say don't use it, that platform, every other platform is. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't take a grade 2 class and show them ChatGPT yet. It's what I'm focusing right now is rather that critical thought and using the platforms that we are already using that actually do integrate that. So, for example, Microsoft Word and writing a story and using predictive text. I mean, that is a form of, so how to make that story your own, how to use your own creative thoughts, how to use your own imagination and innovation and all those kinds of skills using the tools that are already there that have the AI in it. So I think it's there. It's the way we're approaching it and the way we're talking about it that's making it look like a ho-ho.
Yeah. A hoja is like a bug, Dave.
Thank you. My Afrikaans isn't that good. I'm sorry.
Cheryl, if I could add to that, it's also interesting to go, well, it's not about like, oh, you have to explicitly even go teach or show young children this technology. It's already in their world. Like most kids, they're not being explicit. Like a young learner is not, or a child is not necessarily explicitly being taught, this is AI, here's how you use it. They're assimilating and learning just by existing in the world.
Yeah.
And they just see what is in their world and they interact with their world based on the models that they build and see. So, I always like to use WhatsApp because, so if you use Alexa or, one of the Google Home devices, sort of the IoT type things, young kids grow up talking to these systems as if that's normal. Like they're like, there is someone in there gonna reply. Like, if you ask a 4-year-old, like, how does Alexa work? They'll say like, they have interesting theories about how that works, and they're not exactly accurate, but that's their understanding or model, unless a parent or somebody has given them the information and they understand that. But they're just building their own and constructing their own understanding of the world in which they exist. Yeah. And it's hard for us because we didn't grow up with those models. We've got different models. In the same way, when I prefer to use WhatsApp, I mentioned earlier, because that's almost everyone uses WhatsApp in the world, or has at least experienced WhatsApp. And that's kind of interesting because you have a bunch of voice, to text translation happening, predictive text, as Cheryl mentioned already, all of that happening. And little kids like taking phones and sending photos of themselves to their families and friends already because they see their parents do that or their brother or sister do that. And now you have an AI in WhatsApp, like you have Llama in WhatsApp. And I think that's just, it just becomes a new norm for young people. So I don't know. That's why I think we're sort of, it's there whether we kind of like it or not.
Can I jump in? Sorry, I missed a little bit because my Teams is disconnecting me randomly. But you'd be surprised how much of this stuff is just in things they use. I've got a 6-year-old, and I mentioned ChatGPT to her the other day because she's getting into football. I don't know anything about football, so ChatGPT is my go-to. What team is this? What kit is this? And I was doing it the other day, and she just went, "Oh yeah, my teacher's got that." And I'm just there looking confused because I know she's used multiple AI products. I've seen her do it, but because they're embedded into other things, she's not conscious that she's using an AI product. And this is what I was trying to get at with spell check. We aren't like conscious of the brand of spell check we use. We don't even think it's a cheat. We just think it's part of our everyday. And this is what they're growing up into. AI is built into Snapchat, it's built into TikTok, it's built into every single platform they'll use, it's built into Microsoft's browsers. It's just going to be their day to day. And we do need to do a body of work in helping them distinguish what is real from what is imaginary.
Do you think the problem of hallucination is going to go away at a certain point? I mean, there's an argument that AI is going to become more and more powerful over time. And there's a reverse argument that, once you've trained it on millions and millions of terabytes of data, adding an extra terabyte or two is not going to change things really. So do you think it will improve to the point where, I don't know, the appearance of artificial intelligence will be much more convincing than it is at the moment?
I think the data problem is huge because they are training on everything they've got at the moment. And let's be honest, they're also training in a way that probably won't be legal in a couple of years' time because they have data sets that are scraped from the open web. There are so many lawsuits from newspapers and music publishers against AI providers at the moment because they've been trained on all this stuff. So if anything, the quality of the data will likely get worse over the next couple of years. I think hallucinations will get better, not because of the data sets, but I think as the cost of compute goes down, they'll be able to use AI to manage the AI. So you can, at the moment, take an AI output, feed it into another AI and say, can you find hallucinations in this? And it's not foolproof, but it is a secondary check. So I think as the cost of compute drops, we'll have a lot more of these agentic AIs that just match each other. So when you're getting your output from ChatGPT, it already would have been through 2 or 3 other AIs to validate the output before you see it.
The fact checking itself. Yeah, I mean, human beings hallucinate all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm under no illusions that we're any better than large language models at this.
There's actually a huge body of research on human tutoring systems compared to AI tutoring systems, and citing that basically the error rate of human tutors, even in one-on-one situations, ability to predict what a student needs, versus an AI system, it's not much necessarily better on average. So an exceptional teacher is an exceptional teacher, and can outperform an average teacher or tutor. But how do you distribute the world's best teacher? How do you give every child the world's best teacher? It's a really, really hard problem.
I used to do this thought experiment in my classrooms. Actually, yeah, I used to do a thought experiment in my classrooms where it was like, okay, we can automate all these jobs, and with AI, we can automate all these jobs. Will teaching ever be automated? And my students would go, no, that probably won't happen. And I was like, okay, then do you like me? And they were my classes, so they'd be like, yeah, we like you. I was like, well, imagine if every student in the world could be taught by me. Would you want that? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, well, that's what AI. So if I can imbue myself into an AI, like we do at Mindjoy, when we build tutors, we imbue ourselves into it and what we like and our interests and our pedagogies, then yeah, there's an element of that. And I don't think it'll ever replace a teacher, but it's certainly an augmenting factor. And it makes those world's best teachers even better because there's more of them to go around.
Yeah.
But I don't know what you feel, Cheryl, but I mean, my feeling is that students need a range of human beings teaching them. You need exposure to different people, some of whom are having problems, and how do adults cope with those? And others are doing really well at that. It's a good role model. So I'm not sure, can AI replace us? Maybe the flaws in the human being are what makes us good teachers.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole EQ factor, right? I don't think that can ever be replaced. I think that's the way we are designed as human beings, to have that X factor that I don't think technology will ever be able to replace. It's just that connection. It's building that relationship. That will always be what makes us unique. So yeah.
So, and I would say the one thing that's interesting, it's a really hard question though to answer when you phrase it like that, right? Because what do we mean really? Like, do we mean that people will want to get together and learn from other people, when we say teachers? Or do we say replace teachers in terms of them being knowledge experts, content experts? What do we mean when we say like replace a teacher? Because I don't know, I have mixed feelings about this, and it also depends on your context, because I think so just globally on a macro level, we have a huge teacher shortfall, 75% of which is in sub-Saharan Africa, right? And specifically in maths, science, and now we have a new technical subject, coding and robotics, coming in. Where are we going to get skilled people that can facilitate and teach those subjects at a high enough level so that we only have a 60% matric pass rate for mathematics. That means 15,000 students in South Africa a year matriculate with maths. That is the entire talent pool for university enrollment for technical subjects. Now, if you say only, let's say best case scenario, this data is very hard to get, but let's say best case scenario, all 15,000 students, which is not the case, enroll into STEM programs at university level, and only 50% of them pass. Then we're sitting on only producing 7,000 graduates in STEM subjects a year, graduate, and we have a need for 2.5 million engineers in South Africa. That is the scale of the actual problem. When STEM education is a huge problem. We want to create more people, but there's this cost of intelligence and humans. For me, that's the thing. I'm like, how do we get? And then you've got exceptional teachers in the top schools who can only scale their reach so far. And you have incredible teachers all over the world doing amazing things. Like even in South Africa, like WhatsApp groups, teachers sharing knowledge, trying to help other teachers, hosting things on the weekends, boot camps over the holidays, just to expose students. There's so many people trying. Why not? We should try and help those people even more to scale their impact and have a larger reach, because it's too important.
Yeah. So technology could help us leapfrog deficit issues.
Yes. And I think
we've definitely had some success with that, haven't we, Gabs?
Yeah, Dave, sorry. But just in that instance, though, you can see that we need teachers, we need the human teachers, and we need the technology to solve the scale of that problem, right? Sorry, I'm very passionate about that problem. That's why Mindjoy exists.
You're absolutely right, though, because we in the UK, we did a transition from IT to computer science about 10 years ago, and there was no thought given to the upskilling of the teachers. It was just like, you're teaching programming now, and I was okay because I was a computer science student. I knew what I was doing, but there was so much upskilling. There was so much issue with the first run of the qualifications, and even now it's not quite up to standard. It's one of the most underrepresented areas. They've got long-term supply issues, and one of the things that we've seen some success with is sort of augmenting the knowledge of a good teacher with STEM capabilities. So you can usually find a good teacher to put in front of a class, but they may not be a programmer. They may not understand chemistry. They may not be a mathematics specialist. But with the augmentation of the AI's knowledge base, they can use that, they can teach, and they can answer really in-depth questions that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And I used to teach with somebody who was technically a cover teacher. She was probably the best teacher I'd ever met. She could go into any lesson, turn it on, and get the students to do the work. But I always think of her when I think, how much better would her impact be if she could also ask those really deep, high-level questions, and she could answer all the technical programming questions that a student might have.
Yeah. And I mean, Cheryl, what are your thoughts about the new curriculum coming in? What is it? It's coming in grade R.
Yeah, grade R to 3. Yeah, look, it's been coming a long time. It's overdue. But I think I do resonate with what Gabby's saying, both and Dave, that the knowledge base is a lack. I mean, people don't know everything. And so we are relying on technology to fill that gap. As teachers are becoming more of a facilitative role or a guide role in guiding and assisting, maybe more the soft skill development. But yeah, I think technology is going to be that knowledge base and make teachers better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love to think, I want to riff off of what you're saying, Cheryl, with the facilitators. We often, one of our sort of research questions at Mindro is how do you take a non-technical teacher and empower them to be a technical, teach a technical subject, as Dave mentioned. And kind of one of our answers there is that the role of the teacher is going to transform into a coach. And what an amazing, to your point of EQ and what are all the skills you need to be a great coach, and help students reach their potential, motivate them, support them. And part of that's going to be one, adopting a hacker's mindset, putting yourself in the 16-year-old or the 12-year-old's point of view and thinking how they want to like hack systems with this technology, and be more playful and curious about how do we actually like do things. I think learn by doing is going to become huge. Like we're going to start looking at assessment and ways of learning by doing. And what that's going to mean is we're going to have much more lively classrooms where Socratic modes of discussion and verifying what you know and how you know it is going to prevail. And what that means is the role of the teacher, right, is going to be a co-researcher in those environments, a co-learner. Dorian, you said something awesome earlier. It's like maybe one of the important things that teachers need to do for students is model making mistakes. And I couldn't agree more. And I want to add to that and say not just model mistakes, but model how to recover from making a mistake or solving a problem. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to do that together with our students in the classroom. And I think that's actually a really exciting place to be. Like that's a really exciting classroom.
It's that incredible passion and yearning to learn, to be curious, to know more. It's that, I mean, the knowledge, the tool, everything is at our fingertips. I mean, it's there, but how do we take it to another level and just like, oh, wow, Yeah.
We actually see that in the data. We see students are more curious than adults with AI systems. And what's interesting is that the older the students get, the less curious they are. And then the curiosity becomes an outlier behavior. So that's something we can all challenge ourselves as teachers and grown-ups in the room to be more curious with the systems, not just take things at face value, but also challenge ourselves to play.
Well, it's the playfulness that we've talked about a couple of times, Gabi, haven't we? Like we want playfulness and fun to be part of the learning experience. It doesn't just have to be about dry taking in the facts. And actually, I think you can be more playful when you're talking to an AI because there's no peer pressure of asking a silly question or asking a funny question or weird abstract question. All that can be done in the anonymity of you talking to a machine. And actually, the conversations that students tend to have with AI tend to be a little bit more insightful than they have with you. And they solve their problems a little quicker, simply because if they've missed a lesson 2 weeks ago and they've completely missed a topic, they can sort of say, I'm not sure what this is. And the AI just goes, yeah, no worries, let's talk about it. Whereas in a classroom, they might have a bit of sniggering from people that were there, or they might feel that pressure to just need to move with the pace. And the playfulness comes back into it then, because when everyone's working in a very individual way and they're getting their needs met, you can be a bit more fun. You can have a bit more enjoyment in what you're learning. You can do more of the abstract, strange stuff, which is what I like.
I wonder though, I mean, is the AI powerful enough to be able to mediate the content in that personalized individual way? What's your experience with that?
I think it's scary how good it is, honestly. Every time we push the boundaries, and we've been doing some work this week on something that is really pushing the boundaries of where it is at the moment. And the conversations afterwards always seem to go, yeah, it's shockingly good. It's very good at analysis and mediating the flow of the conversation. I, we always talk about like be polite to the AI just in case. But there are some emergent properties to this technology that I think model human thought in really interesting and similar ways. And I do think that with the right prompting and the right sort of structure behind it, you can model a lot of the ways in which we might facilitate things and analyze data and direct conversations in the classroom.
Yeah.
Now, I have a little story just to throw in here. I'm an English teacher with one of my hats, and English teachers have to find interesting comprehension passages, and that's always a bit of a challenge. So I thought, well, I'll get ChatGPT to generate a passage to set questions on. I set the questions, but I got ChatGPT to write, and with a bit of prompting, because initially the writing was so flat and generic, and I had to kind of prompt it. Well, give an example of, rewrite it, but give an example of this. Be more specific and things like that. And what ended up was a passage which I thought would kind of fool people that it hadn't been written by AI. And then in the last question of the comprehension, I said, this passage was written by ChatGPT on this particular date. Has your thinking about the writing changed because of that knowledge? So that was a question right at the end. And I found the responses to that question were very, very interesting. Students were saying, well, they thought, okay, they believed the passage more because it was written by AI, it wouldn't be biased, which is an interesting response. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's with student perception. And then the other big response was they kind of lost all respect for the writing because they thought this wasn't written by a human. So how would it know? So those, I think that, that kind of technophile and technophobic responses are what human beings always bring to new technologies. But what do you think about that response? I can't trust it because it's AI. Should we as teachers be trusting it?
There's so much to unpack there. I think that there is, so with content and that kind of thing, we've seen that a lot of the need for curated content, sort of is still a requirement. People prefer to read and know that this is from a curated or trusted source. I don't think that desire has gone away. I think that, there's something interesting with just like the amount of content on online anyway, that, there's that effect where you're consuming so much that you actually disengage because it's too much and you don't know what's real or not real anymore. So but I think what ends up happening is you disengage. I think anyone disengages when they can't trust the sources. And so what ends up happening is the quality of a source, whether that's a person or a publisher or a brand, actually increases, because you go, oh, wow. And you can even think about this in terms of news, right? Where, it's like Reuters is supposed to be the neutral news, but then they go and, break their own code, and then everyone starts distrusting them in terms of their stated purpose and mission, as an example. Or we have news sources that we have preferences to because of our own orientations and preferences, and our goal-seeking functions. So, and that's how we build our models of trust and reliability, anyway. However, I do think like if you just read, you do build a sensitivity of like, oh, machine output, I can distinguish what it is. But sometimes you can't. You can't always distinguish when it is machine output. And I think that raises really interesting questions. There's a whole, the factual media set of problems and challenges and opportunities. But I think as educators, if we get caught up in that whole rhetoric, because I think that will sort itself out, I think the questions we should be asking ourselves is around motivation, student motivation. So like what actually happens, and you've actually pointed it out, right? Students are like, I'm maybe not so motivated to read the passage. Like, where and why are you motivated to do something or read something or know something? That actually becomes the question. In a world where human output and machine output are indistinguishable, let's go with that assumption. Let's say they're indistinguishable. What happens to human motivation? Why do anything? And I think those are the questions we should be having conversations with our students about. And I think we're going to have a mass need for understanding human motivation and why young people do things and how we help them find purpose and meaning to contribute to the world. And I think that is a really, really important job.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing, hey, Gabi. It's those soft skills. It's not so much about the knowledge anymore, or it's not so much about what the question is, or it's more about the why and the how, and it depends what type of question you're asking, because if I'm wanting knowledge, I tend to over trust, I think, AI when I'm trying to bring stuff together. It's more, am I looking at this? Am I trusting it too much? When it's got to do with stuff that's more emotional or an opinion, I've got to look at it a little bit more critically and evaluate it a little bit more, or give a little bit more context to my question in the type of response I'm wanting back. But it keeps coming back for me. It's those soft skills. It's what the character of a person, the why, what's motivating you. That is more important to me. And I'm pretty passionate about that.
I think also just
that's fascinating. Sorry, Gab.
I think just being a technology user is important. Like, I think it is really, really important because you need those competencies to adequately distinguish and participate, I think, in transformed economies. So I do think that it is actually a really, really important thing. Like, you kind of need both. You need to understand who gets to play, who has skills to like play at the table of the world, and markets and economies and skills demand do dictate one's ability to contribute, right? And it's not necessarily whether you like it or not, but it's just it just is. So I think those are really hard societal questions. Like these are big societal questions, actually.
Yeah.
I want to just jump in to say, I think there's like, if your students are turned off by the idea of reading something made by AI, like, what's the motivation for them to create something if they can just knock it up in 2 seconds with a prompt? And I've been thinking about this a lot this week, because I wrote a blog post on Monday about adapting Bloom's taxonomy to change the create setting. Because if we see that as the apex of learning, they can create an artifact that uses all their learnings. But I can go into, Midjourney and type in amazing cubist portrait of a bald middle-aged teacher, and I get a beautiful work of art of me I can hang on the wall. Like, where's the learning in that? I've just learned to write in a sentence. So, like, I think there's a bunch of stages that get added. Being able to critically evaluate, being able to iterate, and even being able to defend the decisions you've made in your creation, because this is a tool now. It's a tool that exists. So if you are going to use AI to generate the final stage of your learning, can you iterate on it until it's as perfect as it can be? Can you defend the choices you made in your prompting? And all of this is really interesting, I think, because the nightmare scenario for me is a world where teachers use AI to make worksheets, students use AI to answer them, and teachers use AI to mark them.
Yeah.
So who's doing anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the kind of nightmare of, we all thought, okay, robots can do the menial work and we'll do the really creative work. And what large language models are showing us is that AI is quite good at doing the creative stuff, but actually to get a robot to clean a toilet is a really, really, really difficult problem. But what about teachers? Are teachers being left behind? Because, around me, I hear a lot of teachers very worried about plagiarism, very worried that what AI is going to do is remove the ability of students to be able to think critically themselves. That if you can just use a prompt to get ChatGPT to write your essay, are you ever going to learn to write yourself? And is that a problem? What do people think?
I think. You're Dave.
Well, Gabs, you go.
No.
I was going to say we're probably talking about the same thing.
One of you.
I was just going to mention that one of the things that I found very as my teaching career was sort of I was finishing up and about to start at Mindjoy, was students were using AI to make essays. And so my thinking is, how do you get around that problem? And I always go to the model that academia uses. Academia uses this model of defend your thesis, don't they? You've made all these arguments. You've thought about it for a long time. Defend your points. And so we've built some AI tutors that do just that. The student pastes in the piece of work they've done, and it attacks the arguments and the logical fallacies and gets them to defend it. And what this does is it turns it on its head a little bit, because it doesn't matter if the students produce the essay with AI. If they haven't read it, they're not going to be able to defend it.
No.
If they've produced it with AI, but they've gone in and they've checked the arguments and they've improved parts and they've reprompted it and they've really put the thought work into it to make a good essay, then they should be able to defend it really well. So I think it's a reforming, really, in my opinion, of how we do the assessment in a world where you can knock up 2,000 words like that.
Yeah, I have another example, which is a dyslexic student who really struggled to write independently by themselves, like couldn't do the classwork, and started using an AI to help by doing voice input, getting voice and text output, and using that to write their essay. And so now all of a sudden, a student who was error prone, I resonate with this because I was dyslexic, and when I was at school, I had to get a spelling exemption. I had to get all these things to explain my performance in some ways. And then I got into the real world, and I was never allowed to write my exams or anything with the computer, even though there was assisted technologies. Anyway, so this student was able to write an essay and really struggling to read, really struggling to write, but using an AI. And so all of a sudden, 3-6 months later, the student starting to write without the AI because they've had that personalized support and had help, producing the words, practicing writing the words, just like our order of events have just changed. It's like, copy down, you write, build my confidence, find, not be embarrassed, like have a tool that helps me get it done, not be shamed by using the tool until I'm unlocked and I can at least produce, at my own ability. And then at some point, the student started it was a really brilliant artist, and that she loved painting herself, like painting and drawing and things. And she started creating her AI stories. So she would take her written text and put it with her art, and started creating these little books. And eventually her mom was like, oh, we should publish these stories, as little books. I don't know yet if they've done that, but that was just the confidence that a student is enabled. But I think you change the process. The process changes. To Dave's point is, I think we need a new taxonomy for understanding in this world.
Yeah, I mean, it may be as deep as we need a new taxonomy of understanding what it is to be human.
Maybe.
So, there is a question from the floor. If I could, an observation from the floor, and as I've said, I think its value is that it gives students options.
Yeah.
Any comments on that?
The whole, ultimately, education is about empowering the student. And if this is something, a tool that's going to empower students and to give students a better opportunity or an opportunity to expand on what they really can do, why not?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, Cheryl. Like, I have this thing where I say, I think education is fundamentally a process of becoming, whether that is formal or informal education. Um, and I really, really believe that our education shapes how we create the stories of ourselves. So and the tools that you are able to use, whether that is a paintbrush or a pen, a calculator, a AI system, code, helps inform your sense of self.
Mm.
And part of that is about your ability to contribute to the world.
Mm.
And that is what resilience and effectuation and affect and motivation is made of. And to your point, that's what education is about, not passing. That being said, right, we do exist in structures where we do have to write tests, where there are still examining bodies and boards, and we also have to be pragmatic about that. So test writing, I think what we have to do as educators is say, hey, test writing is a skill, it is not education. And if we can first accept, that's like for me, like the first road to transformation is accepting that. If we can state that to ourselves, then we can acknowledge our reality, which is, yes, we do need to get our students to write tests. They exist in a world where they need to be able to pass those tests, to do well, because that's the current system and the structures we have, and they have endured for many, many, many years. To Dorian's point at the beginning of the conversation, which was education systems have also stood the test of time. They've been around for a long time, and they have been very immovable in many, many ways. So it is also to say, okay, sure, there may be some resilience or wisdom in those systems, and they're hard to change, and therefore we have to acknowledge them and work within them. What I think will happen, though, over the next while is you will see this problem of, especially in your high school years, your distribution of achievement in classes is going to be drastic based on how self-directed students are and not. And you're going to see students who can help themselves or use technology to help themselves are going to be at an advantage to students who do not know how to do that. And you as a teacher in the classroom, you're going to have such a wide distribution that's going to be the immediate pain teachers feel. And some teachers are already feeling that in a classroom, right? They're like, these students are ahead, these students are behind. I'm actually teaching 3 grade levels at the same time. Now, I think this technology is going to only amplify that distribution. And that's a really, really difficult thing to manage in a classroom. So that's the first thing we're going to have to solve. And blended learning with adapted software is a great way for students to get one-on-one tutoring in their core subjects to move through core curriculum. What then happens?
Although, I mean, a lot of the research, I mean, if you think about the MOOCs, Coursera and things like that were supposed to address the digital divide. And yet the result is normally graduates did very well in online learning, whereas people who had no experience of graduate education didn't.
So Dorian, say a very, very specific thing to that point, which is in classroom, using the adaptive technology in classroom. And the reason I say that is because MOOCs operates off the assumption that if we talk about the 5% who use technology to self-learn, so the 5% of outlier students who would do that anyway, right? So most of us, the rest of us, who are not in the 5%, which is me, are motivated socially. So I like to go to school. I need to learn from my friends. I learn from things. So we still need school to come together. I think that is the wisdom of school, is that people want to come together and be with others. But that doesn't mean that we need a direct instruction model where the teacher stands in the front of the classroom and everyone has to go by the drumbeat of that one teacher.
I can give you some numbers if you want, because I did quite a successful programming course, 250,000 people have started that course. The drop-off rate is 50% day to day for a while. And at the end of 100 days, you've got about 1,000, like 1.3 thousand people that have finished the entire course. And that drop-off rate is ridiculous. In a classroom setting, you're not having that level of dropout rate because you've got that social learning. And I can tell you now, every class I've ever taught, all those students have come out with an ability to program in some way and the ability to pass the exam. And MOOC is just a completely different thing because it assumes there's motivation, either intrinsic or extrinsic. My course was free, so the drop-off rate was extremely high compared to if they paid for it or if they're in a classroom setting.
Yeah. And I think the blended models, the success you're seeing with completion rates and achievement rate in blended models is where to actually look, not MOOCs. Yeah. So I think that's the, the thing of like being able to still look over your friend's shoulder and say, hey, I'm not getting this. Can you help me? Because I'm so tired of asking the computer. Can someone else try a different analogy or try something else with me? You still need a person, Or sometimes you just want the love or the care and the understanding of a human looking you in the eye and being like, I know I used to struggle with that thing too. Don't worry.
Yeah, or you might even need a teacher as well who can mediate what the AI tutor is telling you.
100%.
We're kind of running out of time, so I'd like to just have one final whip around the table and your thoughts about the future. Where we're headed and what we can expect in the short, medium, and long term. Who wants to start?
I'll start. I think just leveraging the strength that we have in tech, taking it and never losing that passion to be a lifelong learner. And if we can take that element and instill that in every human being, I don't think we'll ever lose or we'll never lose that quality that we have as human beings. It almost feels like we're in a movie scene where we're fighting the bots, But I think that's kind of something that we'll always have as human beings, is that yearning, that curiosity to know, to learn, to explore. So that kind of would be my end to today's discussion is if we can, as educators, just instill that, I think we'll be always one up on the tech. But we want our students to thrive in a tech-driven world. We want them to be exposed to it. We want them to embrace it. So that they can thrive. So that would be what drives me as an educator.
Dave, last thoughts?
I think, and I've gone on for ages about the idea of this 10x 10 times more effective teacher, and I think that's where we're going, because not only do we have systems that can support our students now and give us more time to be proactive in the classroom, not only do we have a great enhancer for our admin, for our knowledge base, for our ability to personalize our learning, but I think the next step is also the data we get back from that, because as students interact with AI, they're building up an enormous amount of record of the learning conversations they're having. Now, that's something we've never had before in the history of learning. We have a recording of the learning conversations, the dialogue, the thinking process even of a student. And I think a lot of our job as a teacher sometimes is to infer where they are and try and use logical deduction to work out where we can support them and where we can pick them up and help them. And I think with AI able to analyze this data, this raw information about the learning process of a young person, it'll give us more directed information about how we can target our interventions, how we can reteach certain topics. And for me, it's not just enhancing the learning experience for the learner, but it's enhancing our ability to be proactive in the classroom for the teacher. And I think it's just going to unlock everyone's potential, because if you're a good teacher now, you're going to be 10 times more effective once you get these tools in your hand.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I can add after those two amazing closing statements. I'm like, how do I take a contrarian stance here? I'll tell you what. When we did the survey with the students, and I think this is maybe something educators, and Dorian, I was so excited to hear your example with asking your students their perspective. I think we need more of that in the short term. I think we need more students involved in the conversation. Because I think they have really, really interesting perspectives and views. And then for us to go, well, why do our students have these views? Because often they're mirroring the attitudes of the grown-ups around them. So if you have technophobic school environments, that's typically the fear-based technophobic view of the students, or vice versa. So it's really an interesting, I think from that perspective, the medium term, we have this really interesting question on community level, school organizational level, which is what are the kinds of places we want to be, and considering the new place in the world, do our actions and the way we run our classrooms and run our schools live up to the ethos of, say, these things we market our schools as being able to do, which is 21st century learning, or STEM first education, or project-based learning schools, or whatever pedagogies you use to differentiate yourself as schools. Do you really actually live up to that promise in the way you do it? And I think that's a big one. But I think this is a really, like to David's point, this technology is going to have you reflect in new ways that we've never been able to do before. On orgs level. And then in the future, like if I go to the long-term view, I think that actually raises really, really big societal questions, which is who should own that data? Is it a school? Is it a student? Is it individuals? And what are the protections and policies that get put in place to support those? But I think if you want a spicy point of view, I think that we'll see a big shift in how we think about our data and what it does, who owns it, how we use it, and that will change the way systems are built, because we'll want to have systems that interact rather than everything being centralized. I think we'll see a bigger shift towards more decentralized systems, even in our approach to schooling. Yeah.
Oh,
I just pick up. Sorry, just very quickly to pick up on Gabi's point. That data, imagine a school's worth or a district's worth or a country's worth of learning data for a student's entire life. Imagine what we could do with that, feeding that into an AI. And as teachers, we can identify types of students and how best to help them. But that's an experiential thing. Imagine that experience being scientifically data-driven. That's just going to be immense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a kind of dystopian view of that in many ways, because of the question of who owns that data.
Yeah.
Is it going to be used against people? Because if you know how people learn, your ability to manipulate them is, to X10, and that frightens me a little bit. So
I think that, Dorian, is like the big question that you need to be, like, if you are, so like, for example, we have to work very, very closely. We work not just in terms of POPIA, but GDRP, which is a lot more, like much stricter in some ways in terms of data protection. But I do think like that is a very important thing that schools should be thinking about, is like actually who owns the data, how much data are we feeding to the systems? Are we making sure that we are anonymizing our data appropriately, that, I'm not putting student names. Yes, great, ChatGPT writes your school reports for you, but there you put in your spreadsheet with your students' names and your thing on the free version. And nothing in life is free. The reason why things are free is because it's a trade in data. That is why it is free. So that is the thing to remember with free. Free is not always good. Like, there's a reason why things are free. Nothing is really free. Like, I think we have to take a moment of pause with these systems with regards to free.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And thank you, all of you, for coming along and sharing your views so frankly, and also for your enthusiasm. I think this is a moment in time when it's quite exciting to be a teacher.
Yes.
And I've been saying that all of my teaching career, so a bit of perspective there. But I think teaching is exciting. Dealing with change is exciting. And I think we need to be critical on the one hand, but we also need to be enthusiastic about looking for every opportunity to improve what we do as teachers.
Yes.
But thank you all very much for coming along and sharing your views, and thank you for those who attended to listen to the views. I will be making the recording available on my YouTube channel, so I will send out the link through the same channels that the link to this came out, so that you can watch the recording. I think you will get an email notification if you attended that the recording is available as well. Okay, so thank you very much, and time for the weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
you. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Hi, Cheryl. Nice to meet you.
If you enjoyed that episode, please don't forget to share, to like, and to leave comments of what your thoughts are on the panel discussion in the comments section. Bye for now, and see you next week.